Welcome back. Focal Point, AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Convivial, congenial, and amiable as always. You are listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. And ladies and gentlemen, this crisis over in Iraq with these contractors, these are civilians. They have, according to sources, contractors that have already gotten out of Iraq, they have been abandoned by the United States military under our current commander-in-chief. The surrounded Americans, according to WND, are currently under ISIS fire from small arms, AK-47s, rocket-propelled grenades. The contractors so far have been able to hold a base, but those on the scene reported it was only a matter of time before the ISIS terrorists succeeded in breaking through the perimeter. The U.S. Air Force, get this, is in a stand-down position. Listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. This is what our commander-in-chief, and that's where this goes. Remember, this is the guy that said, we went after Bo Bergdahl because we aren't going to leave an American behind. Hillary Clinton said, we're not going to leave an American behind. Listen to this. The U.S. Air Force is in a stand-down position. U.S. forces are not assisting even with air cover, so a private extradition flight could land for a rescue. Privately scheduled exit flights have fallen through, sources said, as several private pilots originally scheduled to make the flights have quit. Why? Because they got no air cover from the United States military. They're going to get no protection. The sources contend the U.S. military could provide the necessary air cover to protect the C-130s or other transport aircraft, but so far officials have refused to get involved. So much for not leaving an American behind. Now, we got a special guest on our Decision Maker line. I want to play one soundbite before we do that. The race we're talking about is the race in Mississippi for the Republican nominee for Senate. Thad Cochran is the incumbent. He's been there for 41 years. He's being challenged by State Senator Chris McDaniel, who's been a frequent guest on this program. We've invited Senator Cochran every time we've invited Senator McDaniel on, and so far he has declined to come on this program, just as Senator Cochran has declined to debate Chris McDaniel. He's avoided town hall appearances. He's now avoiding even newspaper interviews, media interviews, and you can see why. I want you to listen to this one clip. This is an excerpt from an interview that Senator Cochran had yesterday with Fox News. And the Fox News reporter, we've talked for 3 or 4 days about this earthquake of a result on Tuesday in Virginia. David Brat unseating Eric Cantor it's a victory of gigantic, humongous. You can't exaggerate the importance of that victory. And so naturally, this Fox News reporter is asking Thad Cochran, the incumbent, what he thinks about the implications of Eric Cantor's defeat. Listen to how their conversation went. This was yesterday. Let's listen.
What happened in Virginia the other day, does that concern you for your chances here in this runoff?
I don't know what you're talking about. What happened to Virginia?
With Eric Cantor losing his seat.
Well, I haven't really followed that campaign very closely at all. Really?
So you have no comment that you want to make? Does that?
No, I can make a comment. You asked me what happened. I don't know. I didn't follow that campaign very closely.
Well, Eric Cantor lost his seat as the majority leader.
Yeah, well, it happens. Members of Congress, some win, some lose. It's not an automatic proposition that you get reelected just because you've done a good job. Voters make their own decisions, and I respect their judgment.
Well, that's kind of amazing. Senator Cochran admitting he had no idea about there was even a race in Virginia. I want to welcome to our Decision Maker line Matt Kibbe. Matt is the president and CEO of FreedomWorks, and the FreedomWorks has been involved in this campaign. Matt, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
It's good to be with you, Brian.
And Matt, I understand you're right here in Mississippi as this campaign goes into the stretch run.
Yes, sir. We're doing a series of 5 events across the state on Saturday. We're going to be in Olive Branch, Tupelo, Starkville, Jackson, and Gulfport, meeting with the very same teams of activists that got us to this point, that forced Thad Cochran into a runoff. And our attitude is, if you don't show up, the bad guy wins. If you do show up, we're going to win on the ground, and it's going to be citizens against all the lobbyists in Washington, D.C.
Now, Matt, let me ask this question. Your reaction to that soundbite that I just played And, to me, and I want to get your take on this, to me, I look at this, you think back to the controversy that erupted when a blogger went into Senator Cochran's wife's nursing facility and took pictures of her, and they're now facing accusations that they actually broke the law, exploiting a vulnerable adult, I think is the legal category. And Matt, I just look at what's happening to Senator Cochran every time he goes out now, whether it's a press conference, a public appearance, he just says something that makes it look to me, and I think the average observer, like he's just not engaged in this campaign. That he's not in a condition where he is prepared for the rigors and the demands of a campaign, let alone public office. And we know that Senator Cochran wanted to resign. He really did not want to run. Once again, he got pushed into it by the GOP elites, by the ruling class Republicans, who have now abandoned him. I mean, Karl Rove has pulled all of his money out of this race once it went to the runoff. But I'm telling you, Matt, talking here with Matt Kibbe, President and CEO of FreedomWorks, it looks to me like the GOP establishment, by pushing Senator Cochran into a race he really did not want to run and exposing him now, I mean, it's starting to get painful to watch what's happening to this man. You feel sorry for him. And I lay the blame for this at the feet of the ruling class Republicans. I mean, maybe they're the ones that are responsible here for exploiting a vulnerable adult. And my question to you is, what's your reaction to what Senator Cochran said yesterday about the Cantor race, and what does that mean for this race?
Well, it's really quite remarkable, and I think you could say the same thing about Thad Cochran that you could say about Eric Cantor. Their heart and their mind and everything that they have done for quite some time is in Washington, D.C. They're creatures of the Beltway. What happens in D.C. really matters to them. What happens in America, what happens in Eric Cantor's district, what happens back in Mississippi is of less importance because it's been so long since they've actually been part of their own communities. And I think that's the message. And you look at what happened in Virginia, in hindsight, this was a long time coming because Eric Cantor was really focused on being the next Speaker of the House and not all that interested in what his constituents back home thought, needed, wanted, what their views were. And I think, if this dynamic sounds similar, I think Chris McDaniel has tapped into that same frustration on the ground in Mississippi.
Now, another question I had, this has just come up in the last couple of days, funding sources for Senator Cochran's campaign, and it's now been revealed that he got $250,000, his campaign, from Michael Bloomberg, who classifies himself as a Republican but is as liberal as any progressive Democrat. He's the guy that doesn't want you to be able to buy a 17-ounce soda in New York City or consume trans fats or salt or anything else that makes food taste good. But so my question to you, Matt, and it looks like they may have even broken campaign laws by the way they processed that $250,000 gift. But here is an established Republican being propped up by $250,000 from an individual who is basically a Democrat in Republican clothing. What's your take on all that? What does that mean?
Hey, by the way, the former mayor of New York also invested heavily in trying to grab guns in Colorado and was rebuked resoundingly by the grassroots liberty groups on the ground there. I think if you look at his Senator Cochran's source of financing, in some ways, Michael Bloomberg is a more legitimate gift than all of the lobbyists that have once more circled the wagons. I saw just a few days ago that they had raised another $800,000 from a whole army of D.C. lobbyists, and that's what this fight is about. It's pretty clear that Chris McDaniel has said, you know what, I'm gonna do what's best for the state of Mississippi and the state of the country, and that's balance the budget. That's stopping all of the special favors and not doing the bidding of all these D.C. insiders. That Cochran's arguing the opposite. He's the guy that's going to bring home the bacon, and he's going to continue to serve the interests in D.C., not Mississippi. You
look at that Brat Cantor race, and two things stood out to me about the campaign that David Brat ran. Number one, I think it was really all about amnesty at the end of the day. That's what it was about. It was about immigration. It was about a secure border. Eric Cantor was leading the charge for amnesty. And David Brat said, no, we need a secure border. If we want a healthy economy, if we want jobs for American citizens, we've got to secure the border, stop the flood of illegal immigrants. And Eric Cantor was sending a different message. That was huge, I think, in that race, because I think the base, where the conservative base is in America, we want a secure border. And the other thing, Brat said, look, I'm just running on the Republican Party platform. Here are my 6 principles. Smaller government, less regulation, constitutional principles, faith in God, conservative values. These are the things I'm running on. And that was a message that resonated with the people of Virginia. And look at the kind of campaign that Chris McDaniel is running. We've talked about immigration. Sounds very much like David Brat, on that issue to me. And I wonder if maybe we may find out on the 24th that message is just unabashed, solid political conservatism. That's the message that the American people want to hear, and they want to send people back to Washington who are going to act on that message and implement it.
Yeah, when you talk to folks on the ground, they view themselves as essentially fixing the Republican Party and realizing that way too many of its representation in Washington has lost track of those basic values that have always made up the Republican platform. And I will remind everybody that Ronald Reagan, the man that really restored the modern Republican Party as both a party that stood for something, but also a party that was able to win national elections, he started that by primarying a sitting Republican president. And everyone predicted at the time that he was destroying the Republican Party. He was doing the opposite. He was kind of hosing out the barn and getting back to a party that actually represented a different set of values than we're getting from the Democratic Party. I think that's exactly what Chris McDaniel is doing today, and all the accusations and the name calling that they throw against him, they're doing it because they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about Thad Cochran's record. They don't want to talk about how the Washington Republicans have lost track of those basic values.
Our guest has been Matt Kibbe. He is the president and CEO of FreedomWorks here in Mississippi as the Thad Cochran-Chris McDaniel campaign comes to its close. Voting will be on the 24th. Matt, thanks for taking time to chat with us today. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Matt Kibbe, president and CEO of FreedomWorks. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're listening to Focal Point on AFR Talk.